Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scott Pollock from the Critical Post Chicago reporting. Today, for our continuing series of interviews, we are pleased to have with us Mr. Bill Still. Mr. Still is a reporter who can be subscribed to on YouTube and an award-winning documentary filmmaker whose works include The Money Masters, The Secrets of Oz, and a new film called Jekyll Island, which can be purchased at the website jekyll-island-themovie.com. During his years of being in this business, he has worked with some very important newsmakers like Dr. Milton Friedman, who was a consultant to Mr. Still on his documentary film, The Money Masters, Joseph Farah of WorldNet Daily, and other notables like Peter Schiff. You can subscribe by simple donation through his YouTube channel and also at his website. Simply put his name in a search engine and you can easily find Bill's various web spaces with lots of material to digest, should you find the discussion of value, or you can simply go to billstill.com. I would urge the folks watching to buy these important films so they can become informed as to how the money supply throughout the world has been subjected to a perversion as opposed to what money really is. Without anything further, here's Mr. Bill Still. Bill, did I leave anything out there, or are we all right and pretty set?
No, that's a pretty good start. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome to the Critical Post Chicago's interview.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for spending time today with us. And we hope in the future that as things break and you can make commentary, you can visit us again so that the audience can become better informed than they are now. Bill, first, I'd like to talk about, the state of news today. You've been in the news business now for 20, 30 years, and you've seen a lot of changes. What is your opinion about what people are being given to digest on television, radio, and the internet?
Gosh, that's an awfully big
I'm
big
sorry,
topic. Let's, for the time being, and we'll see if this is sufficient for you. The state of economic analysis is just really pathetic. You'll see constantly on TV, every other day at least. I don't watch a lot of television, so I'm sure if you watched enough channels, you'd see it every day. But you'll see a statement similar to, well, all our economic problems would go away if we could just get the government to quit printing so much money. And even the chairman of the House Banking Committee has made this statement in a video, and he's a Republican, and it just shows that these guys don't understand where money comes from. The government itself produces in every country on the face of this earth very little of the national money, typically less than 90%. I think in the United States it's about 97% of all of America's money, all US dollars and their electronic equivalents, are produced by banks as an interest-bearing debt. It's credit money. It's not really money. What we seek as monetary reformers is to actually do what people think happens right now, that the government is creating the money. And then it's only a question of who controls the quantity of that money for the benefit of the public interest. That should be the only question and the primary political question that should be debated in every federal election.
Yes. Well, I'm in total agreement with you on that, Mr. Still. I recall from the film The Money Masters that there is a false paradigm also being advertised in the financial press about tying the printing of the dollar to, like, say, the gold standard or a silver standard. I think I recall that in the Money Masters, that it's really a false standard, that it's not necessary. And I recall that at the end of the film, The Money Masters, And it's quite a detailed work, and you certainly deserved the award that you got for that. I recall that at the end of the film, um, there was a solution that I think that you and Dr. Friedman worked out and said, okay, well, all we have to do to get rid of this debt-based money is to uh, just gradually print debt-free money and replace the debt-free money, debt-based money, with the debt-free money in a controlled release by taking the debt money out of the system. Am I couching that right?
Yeah, well, this. It just seems so complicated to the average person that they give up and they don't even attempt to understand it. So we really have to strive on keeping this to the basics. The way money is created is the United States government sells bonds, which are interest-bearing, into the market. And unfortunately, the primary purchaser of these bonds are the largest banks. And thereby, the borrower is servant to the lender, and so the government itself becomes servant to the banks. And we've certainly seen that as a classic example here during the Obama administration. Never before has a presidential administration just shoveled money to the big banks to such a degree as they have for the past 6 years. So if we were to merely pay off these bonds as they come due, and they come due anywhere between 1 year and 30 years down the road, you just gradually pay them off instead of with more debt money, money created through the sale of more bonds. You just pay it off the way people think money is created right now, and that's that the government just prints it. This is called seigniorage in the sovereign money business, where the most important responsibility of a government, of a free government, of a sovereign nation, is the creation and control of its money supply. And by creation, you mean that to print a $100 bill, I think it costs 3 cents, something like that. And so thereby, the government is getting a profit of $99.97. This is called seigniorage. And right now, what happens is that the seigniorage has been given by the Federal Reserve Act a little over 100 years ago to these private banking corporations. So they not only get to profit, but the interest on the growing debt, since the debt is always rolled over, is expanding exponentially. But not only that, it's not only the profit aspect, but it's the fact that they also derive political control, because they control this debt. So a nation, in order to be sovereign, can't be indebted to anyone, because it has to be sovereign. It has to be supreme. It has to be its own sovereign. And it cannot possibly do that as long as it's borrowing money from anybody. The borrowing money on the part of a sovereign nation should be a joke. It should be a criminal offense and should never be allowed, because that just puts the people who lend the money to the government through the purchase of government bonds in the actual hidden yet powerful political driver's seat of any nation.
Well, I've heard it said that, by several individuals, that there's a system that is in place, and I've heard the phrase that because of the way that the monetary system is working today, in today's world, that really the citizens, who are supposed to be the sovereigns in this country, are in a system of, I've heard the phrase used, forced debt creation. And that, tell me if I'm wrong, Bill, but isn't the idea of inflation kind of like a theft?
Well, I think you're
getting
two things confused here. The banks benefit from debt creation on all levels, from government to corporate to personal. It merely enslaves one to banks. Now, should we have corporate lending and personal lending? Yeah, I mean, the average person doesn't want to wait 30 years of savings in order to buy a home. But that's not the case with governments. It's especially pernicious in the case of governments because it cuts into the political control, and it's that political control is very easy to disguise, very easy to confuse the voting electorate that it's actually happening, and so therefore has to be illegal. So really, step one is as you said at the top of the hour, it's to gradually, as these bonds come due, government bonds come due, we pay them off merely by the government creating its own money, which is what the average person on the street thinks is happening, but it's not happening. And so the Israeli model, I think, is especially good, and that is on the first year they would say they currently also experience, I think 95% of their money is created by banks, credit money as an interest-bearing debt, and only 5% of the money is actually created by the government. And their model is, in the first year, they'd say, okay, from now on, in the first year, we're just going to have 80% of the money allowed to be created by banks, and 20% of the money would actually be created without interest-bearing debt by the government for the benefit of all citizens equally. And then we'll do economic metrics, and we'll see how the economy responds. And of course, obviously the economy is going to respond very well because it's the same amount of money, it just doesn't have interest and debt attached to it, and so the economy will thrive. And every time this has been used, this has been the case. And then the next year they'd expand that to 70-30, 60-40, 50-50, and they could take it all the way down to zero if they wanted to. But you know, certainly at this point we've spent at least 100 years under this privately owned central bank debt-based monetary system, and so I don't think we should do anything extreme. I think we should tippy-toe into this over a period of years, and perhaps we'll find some sweet spot where the percentage is just right. Perhaps we'll be able to take it down to zero. Nobody knows at this point because the situation is so bad.
Well, yeah, and to touch on the second part of the question, which is not the idea of, you know, they always throw around this term inflation. Is not the idea of inflation theft by these central banks that are printing this money? I mean, you know, they use this. I mean, you know, in 1960, when you and I were much younger men, you know, it cost $2,500 to buy a nice Oldsmobile.
Yeah,
Now,
see, this is the gold bug argument that inflation is the problem with the economy, and
okay,
it's not.
Okay, go ahead.
It's if right now what we have, because so much of our money is going to pay interest on all this debt, that we don't have inflation right now, despite the fact that the Fed is pumping through a quantitative easing, has pumped over the last year and a half or so, trillions of dollars into the economy, and still, for some reason, we don't have any inflation. Of course, that's because so much of that is being siphoned off into interest. And I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. I went down the wrong path there, and I lost the thrust of the question I was trying to answer.
Well, you know, so in other words, when I say that, if I make the statement, because we've got something in the live stream right now where I make the statement, so you're helping me understand where I don't understand, what I don't understand. So maybe the audience can also learn this too. But when I say that inflation is theft, I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong, but okay, that's not the correct thrust.
Okay.
because right now, if and when we do get inflation, we will not be having inflation as a result of the government creating too much money. We will be having inflation as a result of banks creating too much money, where we'll not only have the inflation, but we'll have the interest on the debt that caused the inflation. When at the very minimum, we could create our own money, and then if we had inflation, fine, tax some of that money out of the system. At least we, the people, our government, would be in control of that process. Where right now we cannot elect a single banker on this planet. They are going to do what maximizes their return because they are corporations, and by definition, they have to maximize their return. They cannot possibly ever operate in the public interest, and that's what the problem is. We have political control by bankocracy right now instead of political control by elected representatives of we the people.
So then the inflection point, then the real thrust is, the differentiation is we have private banks creating money rather than a sovereign people of the American government or any particular country on the face of the earth.
Right. Unfortunately, this is the system worldwide in every nation, and the banks do everything they can to try to confuse the issue, and they confuse it with gold buggery and that this nonsense about, well, a suit of clothes cost the same 100 years ago, the same amount of gold, etc., etc. We were on a gold-backed money system during the Great Depression. That didn't do a thing for us. We were on a complete, totally gold-backed money system during the Roaring '20s, where we had massive inflation in the stock market. We were totally on a gold money system that did nothing for us. It doesn't matter what backs the money. It doesn't matter at all. All that matters is who controls the quantity of that money. Will it be banks, because they're the primary owners of gold, the biggest quantities of gold, or will it be we the people through some sort of political process? And then, of course, the gold bugs say, oh, it would be a total disaster if you let the Congress decide how much money was in the system. Well, it might be a total disaster, but it would only be 1/10 as bad as the system we have right now, where the banks are in control of the system and charge us interest to boot.
Right, and then of course, you know, then there's the foreign exchange money markets and the free-floating valuations. Is that explain to the people what the forex market does? Do you have any information about that?
No, that's outside of my my area of expertise. My area of expertise is macroeconomics, not.
Okay, but you know you know, I just put a report on the air, and I said, look, I said, you know, you think that the United States is the only country that's playing games with their money supply? You know, the Federal Reserve and the private banking cartels keeping people under the heel of their debt money supplies. We're not the only ones. We're not the only ones with a debt clock. And I said, you know, look, I said, here, China has a debt clock. The European Union has a debt clock. The United States has a debt clock. All the countries across the face of the globe have debt clocks. Why? How is that possible? Other than the fact that, you know, governments are inefficient and they overspend their budget.
Well, yeah, and if they were not allowed to issue these bonds and thereby get more money in than they're actually taking in through taxes, then what would happen? What would happen is they would immediately, if they wanted to overspend, have to increase taxes, and there was no way to hide that. There's an excellent way to hide that if you're on this debt money system. You just go and issue more U.S. bonds, and they say, well, the debt will never be repaid. Well, maybe the debt will always be rolled over, but the interest is climbing exponentially. Right now, that interest payment per annum is $450 billion per year, where in 2010 we could have saved the NASA's manned spaceflight program for $4 billion a year, less than 1% of that. And I guarantee you, within 2 years, we're going to start, well, within 4 years, we're going to see interest payments issuance of $1 trillion a year. That comes off of the top. That's all of your income tax money going just to pay interest to private banks for the issuance of bonds so the government can spend more than it takes in. A payment that is entirely unnecessary. We don't have to be under this heel. We just have to realize how we can escape it and ignore these arguments. Oh, you don't want Congress to be in control of the issuance of money. That would just be a horrible thing.
Tell me, can you make a remark about when I called you the other day and you asked me the question, well, what's your solution? And I said, well, you know, we could start by using old silver coinage with each other. And what is your take on all of that?
Well, silver coinage is fine with me. Gold and silver coinage as a legal part of the money system, I have no problems with that. It's just another complementary currency, just like Bitcoin or all the other cryptocurrencies. I have no problem with that. It's just another complementary currency. During the Great Depression, the only way that the average person, you and me, lived was there were over 3,000 complementary currencies. What is a complementary currency? People don't have money. They don't have the national debt-based money, and so they just create money on their own to trade between one another. And as long as gold and silver is not somehow issued exclusively by banks as an interest-bearing debt, I have no problem with it. But money should never, ever, ever be based on debt.
Right, right. And what's your opinion about the state of income taxation, Bill? You know, I'm of the opinion that a person's body is their private property. And taxation is all part of this scheme that we're in. So is a person's body legally taxable? Is an income? I mean, income is income. If I go to work for you, Bill, and I agree to work for whatever amount of money you're agreeing to pay me, I am that's an even up barter in my mind. There is no excise. I am not there's no capital gain there. So why is it, in your opinion, and I don't know if you can answer this question, why our private property is being taxed that way?
Oh, because they can do it. Back when the income tax was first passed in the early 1900s, there was such an uproar and uprising that it was repealed, and so they had to make it a constitutional amendment. And of course, there is excellent evidence out there that the amendment was not properly ratified by the necessary number of states. But the bottom line is, right now we've had this tremendous scandal with the IRS, and we have a brand new Republican Congress sweeping, and this is the perfect time to just whack that income tax, to cut it out of the system entirely and employ some type of a consumption tax. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense. The income tax will never work fairly. Just because of the way it's constructed, it can only be used as a political weapon against the enemies of whoever's not in political power at the time. There's no sense for it. Just have a consumption tax. The people who buy more stuff pay more tax, and you pay it at the point of sale, so there's no, legal liability. People with guns coming to your house and taking your computers and throwing you in jail. I mean, that's just nonsense. I mean, a generation from now, this will just be seen as the dark ages. And, our grandchildren would say, why did you put up with this? And they just won't understand how pervasive the fear of the IRS is. And besides all that, the illegality of that and the immorality of that, we just don't need to have it. We can, as long as we're not generating all this interest on this debt, plus as long as we abide by the Constitution and employ tariffs and excise taxes in the proper way, we more than likely would not need an income tax. I ran for president for the Libertarian nomination for president in the last cycle, and I got a nice close look at the inner workings of the Libertarian Party. And one of the things that they do wrong is they're all about free trade, and free trade is just wrong. I mean, the Constitution specifies that Congress is to control tariffs, and once again, tariffs are just another expression of national sovereignty, and nations should be allowed to have tariffs to manipulate their economic relationship to other nations in any way that suits the purposes of their citizens. The free trade merely reduces it's just for the corporations. I mean, it reduces all manufacturing to the lowest common denominator anywhere in the world, and nations need protective tariffs to protect their own internal manufacturing. You just can't have a thriving economy unless you make most of the stuff that your nation needs in the nation. And importing and exporting should be the exception to the rule, not the absolute dominant rule as it is getting to be today.
Yeah, so then you would agree with me that a person's body and their labor is their private property and should not be taxed.
Well, I haven't really thought about it as deeply as you have on that level. I just go about it in the two ways that I approach it. It's not necessary. We can do our finances without it. It's immoral. We should have a consumption tax, and that's really all I've really thought about.
I didn't know that you ran for ran on the Libertarian ticket.
I didn't run on the ticket. I ran to run on the ticket.
Oh, okay.
And I was placing second in all of the state primaries that I ran in against New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, who is just a complete bumbling idiot when it came to economic matters. And he made a very famous statement, which I deployed on my YouTube site, that, oh, well, none of these Wall Street people are really crooks or criminals. They just made a few mistakes. And so then when it came my turn to speak after that, I said they're crooks and they need to go to jail. And now this has come back to haunt Johnson. And in any case, I ran against him and did very well, considering the fact that he spent over $1 million in his campaign and I spent $5,000 in mine, and had completely ran out of money 2 weeks before the national convention, so couldn't continue on and participate.
What did you have to deal with the government corporation, the Federal Election Commission, during all of that? What was it like?
Oh yeah.
What's that process like, Gary? I mean, $5,000 seems to be. Did you have to have a bunch of lawyers and stuff like that? I mean,
no, I just had volunteers who were smart and looked into it. I didn't really deal with the FEC. Our treasurer did, and our campaign manager, and they just figured it out. You can figure it out. It's not that hard.
Really, and it's not this monstrosity that is meant to keep the two political party system in place?
Well, it's not a monstrosity that's unfigurable, outable to the average person, I'll put it that way. Whether it's designed specifically to keep the two-party system in place, I don't know about that. I think more the holdup is at the state legislature level, where they make it so difficult for a third party to get on the ballot, which is really why I still support the Libertarian Party, because they've gone, it takes such an extraordinary amount of volunteer effort to get a third party on the ballot in every state in the union. And even in the 2012 cycle, the LP failed to do so, I think, in Oklahoma. They got 49 of the 50 states. But it's, your lawsuits in half the states every presidential cycle in order to maintain their ballot access. And that's really, I think, where the holdup is and where reform needs to be made. Now, whether that that is actually coming down from the top, from the SEC, FEC level or not. I don't think so. I think it's more from the state legislature level. It's just to their benefit to try to keep third parties off the ballot.
Yeah, well, you know, it's perfect. You know, I've heard it said that it's the perfect system for herding cats if you just have a you know, a two-party system. And I've used the phrase quite a bit, the Hegelian dialectic.
Right.
It's always going, you know, it's two sides appearing as opposites, always moving in the same direction, down there.
Well, I've known several congressmen, and I grew up in the Washington D.C. area, and oh gosh, do I really want to say something good about Congress?
I don't think you really
there
can.
are. I think there are a lot of people who are very well intentioned and do the best they can given the system that's in place. And the rottenest thing about the system that is in place is this money issue and the fact that big banks, through the issue of our money as an interest-bearing debt and just the continual drain, sucking out of the economy and into their pockets, not only from a financial perspective, but from this political control perspective, I think that is the overwhelming problem with what's wrong with Congress. And if we could eliminate that, we'd eliminate a lot of this. And in my latest film, Jekyll Island, we released it, and then 2 months later I went to Israel and was approached by an Israeli lawyer who said, you know, I've really got to talk to you about how this all works. And he was the lawyer for the banking community. He was the go-between between the banking community and the Israeli Knesset. And he had gotten in a fight with the bankers and sued them and all this. He's going through all these machinations trying to get them out of politics. And he explained to me how it works. And that's they simply, in Israel, they indebt the political parties. There are about, I think, 8 primary political parties in Israel, and they try to get them indebted to the banks by a factor of 3 to 5 times what their net worth is, through a system of 30, 60, and 90-day call notes, primarily 60-day call notes. And so if your party has a net worth of $1 million, and so the bankers loan you $5 million over the course of a couple years, you know, they say, well, here, take this $1 million, and then they go to the next party and say, you know, this party over here just got a fresh $1 million. They're going to wipe you out unless you borrow some money too. And it's not very long before you've got them all indebted, way more than their net worth, and within 60 days, you can bankrupt them. And even some of these call notes, the leader of the party has to put his personal house on the line, on the note as well. And I explained, this guy, his interview is in the film Jekyll Island, and it was just a total eye-opener to me. I mean, you can theorize about these things, but when you actually see the face of a guy telling you, I was there, I made it work, this is how it works, it makes a big difference.
That's amazing, Bill. That's an amazing admission. I mean, I had no idea. You know, we're always being, all of us, everywhere, are being fed a narrative, and I think that the state of news today and journalism today is terrible because people's eyes are constantly being diverted, and their eyes aren't on the ball. And that's why I wanted to have this talk with you, because the issue is money.
The issue is debt.
Well, yeah. Well,
excuse me for interrupting you like that.
I would have gotten to that, but the issue is central to our lives is money and how that money is created. That
if I could give you another example.
Go ahead.
And this example was told to me maybe 3 years ago, and I was shocked by it. But then when you put in the story next to it that I just told you about the Israeli banker, then you really see how pervasive all this is. That is, I have a friend who was president of one of the 3 alphabet major networks in New York. He was president of the radio side, and I won't mention his name. But when I finished The Secret of Oz, I knew him, and through his second in command, who I grew up in the news business with. And so I sent him a copy of The Secret of Oz, and I figured, well, they'll look at it, look at the cover and throw it away, and that'll be it. But they actually looked at it, and they called me back and said, "This is great." And I was just stunned. I mean, what do you mean? You actually looked at it, number one. Number two, you thought it was good? And they said, yeah, because this is the way it works in New York. And that is, all of the major networks are indebted up to the gills. And the way they do it is they'll go to NBC and say, you know, you could really use a new studio because these other networks are kicking your butt. And so how about if we lend you $20 million? And they go, yeah, sure, we'll take that. And then they go to the next network and say, that network over there, they just borrowed $20 million. You're going to get behind. You need $20 million too. And they go, yeah, sure, we'll take that. And so pretty soon these networks get so indebted, and it's always, interestingly enough, it's always to J.P. Morgan. Like Morgan, there's some unwritten rule. Morgan is the one that controls the media lending in New York. And so pretty soon they're so indebted that they can't even pay the interest on the loans. They have to have these loans rolled over every time. And this guy says that very effectively puts Morgan in complete control. If he gets a call from Morgan and they say, you can't do that story, they don't do that story.
Amazing. Yeah, well, that's a sad state of affairs. I heard recently, then I want to talk about Dr. Friedman. You work with Dr. Friedman. I heard that the Chinese bought J.P. Morgan's building and the vault, and that the Chinese are slowly subsuming large tracts of the American economy so that they don't dump their bonds on the market.
Well, they're not going to dump their bonds on the market because that would kill the goose that's currently laying this giant golden egg.
For them, for certain.
Yeah, yeah.
For them, and also, you know, I think people don't understand. Besides the nature of money and how it's created, also the nature of what occurred with all these trade agreements and how much manufacturing has been shipped out of the country. I mean, it's, you know, I've heard estimates as high as, you know, 57,000 manufacturers have left mainland here, and a lot of them wound up in China. Some of them wound up in India. There's been an awful lot of outsourcing, and the people that are, you know, in control. I was just mentioning in a report about the 147 major transnational corporations that are basically in control of a lot of the world's resources. That was done by a Swiss company called Systems Design out of Zurich. And they show the cross-pollination of all of these major corporations.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that graphic, and you know, what can I say? We need protective tariffs. We need the ability to have protective tariffs. We need our Congress, elected by us, to be in complete and total control of everything that goes on in this nation, where these trade agreements specifically try to cut any ability of us to change this once we sign the so-called agreement, or once President Obama agrees to it by executive order, or whatever. Nations need the ability, not that everyone should have tariffs, but they need the ability to protect their own internal manufacturing, because that is the absolute backbone of a productive, effective economy.
Yeah,
but then on the second level, if I could just say one more thing, and that's,
sure.
I'm completely against consolidation, over consolidation of power at every level of governance, be it federal, state, municipal. Everything has to be deconsolidated to the maximum possible extent. You'll never see the American people take to the streets with signs saying, please give us more consolidated power of you know, they all know intuitively that deconsolidation of power is where it's at, and the overconsolidation, big brother effect is not a good thing. And now they're, you know, they're trying to do this on the international level, this whole new world order concept, and you see it couched. I heard it today on Bloomberg that, oh, if they just bring on the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, then we're going to see an increase in the United States of 500,000 jobs. A number just literally pulled from thin air, and it's a serious problem. And I just hope that the newly elected Congress has the guts to come down hard on this.
Well, you know, I'm sure you're well aware of an individual that I spent some time listening to, and I'm of the same opinion that that man is, and he's pretty well known in the Washington area, and that would be Mr. Mark Levin. And he is of the opinion that that's simply not going to happen. I mean, the kinds of changes that we need in terms of the mindset that's in Washington D.C. Just this is status quo and steady as we go, and down the yellow brick road.
He's wrong.
Okay.
I'll tell you why he's wrong.
Okay,
because if this does occur, and this new world order concept, consolidation of power up to the international level, is effectively implemented, it will be the doom of society. And I just don't see that happening.
I think you misunderstood the way I covered that.
Okay, sorry.
What he is saying is that we, the mindset in Washington has to change, but he doesn't think the mindset in Washington will change.
Well, if the mindset in Washington doesn't change, then we're going to see agreements like TPP. And you don't have to listen to the high-level financial community, which is, to me, represented by the easiest access we have to that mindset is by listening to Bloomberg. And they are all for all these trade agreements. And they're all for it because it's going to increase profits. And if we're going to be a world governed by for the benefit of corporations instead of for the benefit of we the people, then we're doomed.
Well, Catherine Austin Fitts is another name that I want to bring into this conversation, and all of this stuff about trade, which does have something to do with our money and people being able to work and earn it. And she said that, you know, it's as she puts it, it's the slow burn, you know, and you know, refuting what you call the gold bugs and this whole big inflation collapse that we're supposed to see. There's a guy by the name of Bill Widener, I think it was, that wrote a book, and he was advertising on Newsmax about the final collapse of the dollar bill and what will happen. And there's all these scare tactics going on. Whereas Catherine Austin Fitts, the owner of the Solari Report, was saying that no, not really. There's not going to be this uncontrolled, at least in her opinion, not going to be this uncontrolled dollar collapse that everybody keeps on talking about in the commodities and precious metals market. It's just going to be a slow burn, and that's what's been going on and what will continue to trend.
I would tend to agree with her because they're skating dangerously close to an uprising on the part of the American people right now. The American people spoke on Election Day, and if they take any more steps in the wrong direction at this point, you know, there could be continuing severe consequences for them. And so the last thing they need is some type of very dramatic downturn. I mean, it might happen anyway, but I don't think they're going to create it. I think they as Ms. Fitts said, they want to see this the boiling frog thing occur.
Yeah, well, it's been the boiling frog, but now we're getting to the point where people are now starting to feel the hot water. Thank God there's been the dollar on the market. I watch the Forex on every day, and the dollar's been on one hell of a tear. I mean, against all the major currencies, the dollar's weighed up, and then you hear guys. I don't know. Are you aware? Uh, Max Kaiser. Do you know this name?
Yeah, I've been on the show a bunch of times.
Oh, you've been on Max's show, and Max talks about the theft that's going on quite a bit. But the dollar's been on a tear, and he talks about how there's been fixes on the COMEX, and the London bullion exchanges are all being manipulated and stuff like that. So we've seen. Who do you think? How is it occurring that the stock markets are at an all-time high? The S&P, the Dow, the dollar is also moving along with the markets, especially over the last 3 months. Can you make any remarks to that?
Well, sure. I mean, the stock market's on a tear because of quantitative easing.
We know that, but
any type of easing on the part of the Fed, it's poured in at the top. And then theoretically it comes down to us, but that which does eventually come down to us takes years and years and years to happen. So as far as the U.S. dollar, I mean, it's the cleanest dirty shirt in the world concept. We might not be so hot, but we're the safest place still because we're the largest economy. We're still the bastion of world freedom, despite all of our troubles. But all of our troubles are on full display. Thanks primarily to talk radio and other people like that. Not full display, but on display to a degree greater than any other country in the world. So we're still the freest nation in the world, and everybody knows that. And as this darkness approaches, this ultimate consolidation of power, the freedom-loving money is going to continue to come here.
And you don't think that, I mean, I've heard reports that there is trillions of dollars being parked in these multinationals, and they're holding on to their cards.
I don't understand it. Maybe they know what's coming. I don't understand that aspect, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, have you heard those reports? I mean,
oh yeah, sure. The head of the Dallas Fed famously made that remark about 6 months ago. Said that before this all started back in '07, reserves in all the Federal Reserve, in all the banks governed by the Federal Reserve, were something like $46 billion, and now reserves are $2.5 trillion amongst the banks. So. Someone who understands banking a little better than I would have to answer that question. I'm sure there's a very logical reason for it, but I'm just not. I don't want to take a guess. And
yeah, sure. Now, in your work with Dr. Friedman on the Money Masters, did you come across? I mean, the Federal Reserve is a private banking corporation.
Absolutely.
Who the heck? Who owns this thing? Did you come across the names of the families? I mean, is it like what we learned from what went on in Jekyll Island in the late 19 era, or the early 19 teens? The Warburgs, the Morgans, there are a couple of. Who are these banking families, Bill?
Well, the Fed is completely, all the stock in the Fed is owned by the banks in the country.
Banks?
And so All banks, all Federal Reserve chartered banks,
So
which
in
is
other
the
words,
vast
Bank of
majority of them. There are
America's.
still some state chartered banks only, but even they, most of them become members of the Fed as well. So it's when you're asking about what individuals have control, it's the people who own controlling interest of those individual banks all around the country. And this is something that Eustace Mullins tried to tried to specialize in, that I know the secret Class A stockholders of the Federal Reserve and all that, and it doesn't matter. And if you went out and jailed every Rockefeller and every Rothschild and every Warburg in the world tomorrow, nothing would change. Absolutely nothing would change. This is another rabbit trail they try to get you on. You know, it doesn't matter who's doing it. What it matters is what they're doing, because what they're doing is so simple to fix. Just take back the money power back into we the people's hands. That's all you have to do.
Yeah, and isn't it true that before he was killed, President Kennedy actually tried to do just that?
No, that's absolutely false.
Is
I looked into that. This was
Did you?
back in the days
Okay.
before the internet, where we had to spend 3 days in the Library of Congress trying to look up Executive Order 11110,
Yeah,
and all you have to do is read it, and you'll see it has nothing to do with U.S. notes. Absolutely nothing. Silver certificates were coming to their end because the silver prices had risen above $1 an ounce, so they had to get rid of silver certificates. So they were transferring authority to issue silver certificates from, let me see if I get this right, from the President to the Secretary of Treasury. Maybe it was the other way around. It's been so long since I've read it now. Has nothing to do. Kennedy was an internationalist. He was not a hero that was going to take a bullet because he was going to kill the Fed. Forget it. That's another rabbit trail. I taught every conference I speak at for the last 20 years. I've had to have that question asked me. I keep telling, I put it in my book, the lock, stock, and barrel what the proof of this is, and it doesn't make any difference because Tex Mars, or one of the Mars, put it in his conspiracy book, and people just recite it time and time and time again, and it never seems to go away.
Well, and I'm kind of like playing devil's advocate. I want to play the cards that everybody keeps on regurgitating. That's why I'm saying these things, so that you can
I
explain it.
understand. I understand.
You
And
know,
that's an important thing to do, because our biggest problem in all of this is we get confused and get going down all these rabbit trails which don't make a darn bit of difference. There's only one thing that makes a darn bit of difference, and that's that we the people should, our country should issue and control the quantity of money in circulation.
and get rid of income tax for sure.
Well, we wouldn't need income tax if we did that.
Well, we wouldn't need income tax if the bureaucracies were a little bit less big than they are. I mean,
If we couldn't borrow money, we'd have to raise taxes. I guarantee you, in 1 year, that would come to an end. If it actually had to become transparent of what was going on, where the spending was where the money was coming from. If every single year they had to raise taxes another 10, 15, 20%, that would come to an end real fast.
oh, I'll bet. Well, the other thing, well, there's also inefficiencies, and there's of course the conservative view about having a strong military, and half our budget for the federal government goes to the military.
Whoa, no, it doesn't.
That's what people are saying.
Well, it's
I mean,
not hard to look up the numbers.
I have not looked at the United States budget. I have been chasing down, what is a government corporation? What controls a government corporation? And there are such things as government corporations. And why? How do government corporations operate as opposed to private corporations? I've been chasing down this rabbit hole. But I want to talk to you about your work with Dr. Friedman. He was pretty much. Did you learn all of the things that you're telling us in this interview? Did you learn a lot of that from Dr. Friedman?
No.
Well,
I knew almost all of it except for one little piece, and that I just being a reporter, I knew how to that to back up any story, the gold standard of being sure your story was correct was to find a professor at a full-time teaching professor at an accredited U.S. university to back up everything you were saying. It's called a readback. You give a readback on tape, and so that's what I was doing to Dr. Friedman. I knew how to do that stuff. I knew how to get in touch with professors. You call the university press office and say, I want to talk to a professor on such and such and such. You don't call the professor, you call the university press office, and boom, within 24 hours you'll have a professor on your telephone line. And so I called them up and said, I've got this documentary on economics, and I'd like Professor Friedman to comment on it. And 24 hours later, ring, ring, Milton Friedman was on the phone, and he was very gracious and said, yeah, FedEx it to me, and I'll look at it over the weekend. And we did so, and he called me back on Monday, and I'll never forget the first words that came out of his mouth. He said, boy, if you end the Fed and don't do anything about fractional reserve lending, you've done nothing. And that one sentence, I mean, we talked for extensively. I wanted to be sure I understood what he was talking about, but that one sentence completely changed. We had to go back and change the entire edit of the Money Masters because I was still, oh, if we end the Fed, it'll all be okay. Wrong. It's not the Fed. It's what the Fed, the banks represented by the Fed are actually doing through lending, through buying government bonds. That's what it's all about. And so, yeah.
And so all the bankers across the country, the Fed, you know, so we can say that the Fed is composed of J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, all of these major household names as well as some lesser known names. Would that be correct?
They're stockholders, yeah. I mean, so, they're the biggest stockholders. Probably none of the 12 governors of
the Fed?
No, other than we can buy stock in the banks that own stock in the Fed.
Okay, so it's a private club, basically.
Yeah,
if you're a bank,
absolutely.
If you're a
bank, it is literally a private corporation, and federal courts have ruled repeatedly that this is the case whenever it comes down to questions where the Fed is trying to claim, oh, we're a quasi-governmental entity, therefore we can't be sued. Federal courts say, wrong.
So then, a lot of the things that Ron, for instance, former candidate for President Ron Paul, and the things that he's saying, does Ron Paul, in your opinion, have the narrative right on this regard?
No. No, I'm
not trying to get you into a fight with him, but
he made great headway in raising awareness of this whole issue. But you know, ending the Fed will do absolutely zero. Auditing the Fed, you know, I don't want to criticize Ron Paul because he took it a long way.
Well, he was the first. He was one of the earliest voices that history can recall, that I can recall, that I've been following government. I mean, Ron Paul goes back to Congress, what, in the late 1980s. He was talking about this stuff. So he did carry the ball a long time by himself. There's no question about that.
That's right. That's right.
How is it that you became so immersed in this subject? What made you do this, Bill?
Well, that's kind of a long story.
Well, can you give us the cliff notes? I mean, you know, what made you do this? You know, nobody has made a documentary. I've looked at a lot of movies, documentaries, what have you, about money. I have listened to a lot of people. I watch the markets every day. And I'd really like to know how in God's name the dollar right now is going on a tear. I mean, was there so, you know, anyways, I don't want to even get off on that subject. But, you know,
okay, I'll tell you.
I have not seen anything. I have not seen
I'll give you the short version.
I've not seen
and that
anything.
Is in October of 1973. In October of 1973, my dad, who was chief scientist of the Minuteman missile system. He was an Air Force officer. He was one of the architects of the Defense Communications Network, et cetera, was approached by someone claiming to be affiliated with the Nixon White House and asked how he and his friends in the military would feel about a military takeover of the U.S. government, the purpose of which would be to install President Nixon in office for a third and possibly subsequent terms. He was shocked, and he immediately wrote up a memo to his friends in Defense Intelligence and to the FBI and put it out there. And so that threw me into this whole strange Washington thing right at the time of the Watergate investigations and all that. And the bottom line of it is I came out realizing that there was some force that went beyond merely partisan politics, went beyond Republicans and Democrats. It was controlling the system, trying to consolidate power and undermine the U.S. Constitution. And so it kind of, I knew I'd have to write a book on this, but I just didn't have the idea all formed up. And so I wrote for a newspaper for 5 years, and that kind of got me the writing skills. And then in 1990, I was able to finally get this book out of me. It was the first New World Order book. It was called New World Order, The Ancient Plan of Secret Society, sold 250,000 copies in its day. And but I just kind of touched on the Fed because I didn't understand it, but I knew that somehow this was the locus of power. And it took me another 2 years to write my second book, which was called On the Horns of the Beast, the Federal Reserve and the New World Order. And then an attorney in Oklahoma read that and said, this is great, we need to, what do we do to try to make this more widely known? And I said, well, what needs to happen, you know, we're coming on the video generation. If you're not on the screen, you don't exist. So we need to produce a documentary. And neither one of us knew what we were doing. I mean, the Money Masters was shot on a high-8 video camera, you know, about this big. And we traveled all over the world, 3 guys, you know, all we really knew how to do was, you know, go to the place where it happened, stand up in front of it, and do the best I could at memorizing or reading a script held up on a piece of paper right besides the camera lens. And that's how the Money Masters was made. And that's it.
Well,
I didn't have any template to go by, or.
Well, yeah, and I recall watching this film. You know, and it's quite lengthy for a documentary. I mean, it's quite detailed, and I have not seen anything quite like it, which is why you got an award for it, because everybody took a look at it. So now, so then when while you were making it, you ran your whole thesis by Dr. Friedman, and that was his input into why you made the Money Masters the way you made it, and then proposed at the end of the story, the documentary, how to replace the debt money supply with a sovereign money supply with, as you say, quote unquote, seniorage.
Yeah, well, I mean the actual law that is at the end of the Money Masters is written by my partner, the attorney, and so I couldn't have written the legalese of that. I can just outline in broad general terms what needs to happen, but he actually came up with a plan. And then
so it
after
wasn't Milton Friedman that came
up
with that.
after we had that all together, then Friedman took a look at it, and we just had to go back and re-emphasize that ending the Fed won't do it. Ending fractional reserve lending and the ability of governments to borrow from banks, that's what will do it.
So, well, and for the people that don't understand what fractional reserve banking is, that means, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but if you've got $1, you can lend 9 because you got what? Roughly.
Well, it's all a sham, because we found out during congressional investigations in 2008, you know, how the system crashed, was that they weren't even sticking to those limits. J.P. Morgan, Citi, all the big banks, instead of being leveraged 10 to 1, 9 to 1, or 10 to 1, which was the legal limit, they were leveraged 52 to 1. Freddie and Fannie were leveraged 80 to 1, and Goldman Sachs was leveraged 333 to 1. So they weren't paying any attention. Those fractional reserve limits are just to make people think that the Fed is actually doing something when they can't control the banks. The banks own them. I mean, it's a giant sham. If it wouldn't matter what fraction you put on it. We have to get out of the business of banking corporations controlling the quantity of our money.
Yeah, and did you see that report in the Wall Street Journal back in August that and I put that in a recent my recent narrative, which is that the headline read, I believe in the Wall Street Journal Market Watch, bank regulators roar at $700 trillion market, and they were talking about the size of the derivatives market in the world, and with all the narrative that's wrong that everybody's listening to, especially the gold bug people, I came out with the opinion that they're going to keep on playing this game, and if there's a $700 trillion derivative market full of mortgage-backed securities, credit default swaps, all of this stuff, they can ignore these books as long as they want, and they can keep this game going on forever.
Right. Unless we all get focused on what really is the issue and quit going down all these rabbit trails, there's absolutely no hope. I've spent the majority of my adult life arguing with gold bugs, and that's very depressing to me. That's not a real good way to, at the very end, I'm 66 years old right now, to have spent your life, but it's just something that was necessary for some reason. I'm not well spoken. I've been put in this position. I've done over 3,000 radio and TV interviews, and I just hate every second of it. That's why I almost didn't do yours. That's why I asked you questions right at the first when you first called me, just because I rarely do interviews right now. I doubt if I'll ever do another conference appearance. I just don't like it, and somebody else is going to have to pick this up and run with it. I've done my part.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have no problem with picking up where you left off, Mr. Still. I can tell you that we appreciate you spending time with us, but, I think that the biggest problem is that people don't understand money. They don't understand what makes money. They don't understand a store of value, and they're bamboozled by hedge fund managers and 401k artists. I mean, it's all they don't understand. They don't even understand what privatizing their own capital is.
Well, see, once again, just the term store of value is leaving the wrong impression. Money shouldn't be a store of value.
So I am helping the problem by using terms like that.
Yeah, because that feeds into the gold bug narrative that really you have to have value-backed metallic money in order. That's the solution to the problem, and it's not. We tried that. All you have to do is look at the Roaring '20s and the Great Depression, where the gold bugs were in complete and total control. That did nothing.
So then, money is basically just an agreed-upon sum.
That's right.
So if I print something and I say it's of value to you, and you agree to that value, then it's okay if I keep on printing that to you, and you and I keep on doing commerce. That's basically what you're saying in a simplistic form. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the complementary currency definition, and I'm fine with complementary currency. But really, the core, the nut of this problem is, if you go out and ask the average person on the street, where does the money come from? They will say, the government prints it. That's the core of the problem. That's what should
The government
happen
doesn't print
because
it.
people know intuitively that's what should happen, but it's not. And that is the primary thing behind the curtain, the wizard's curtain that they're trying to hide from us. The government does not create the money. We, the people, aren't in control of the most important aspect of a sovereign nation.
And ladies and gentlemen, there is no better way to end this interview than to stress that point. Now you understand from a man who has spent the last 41 years of his life researching this subject, what money is, where it comes from, and who should be in charge of the size of the supply. Is
Yay.
that not correct, Mr. Still?
Yay. That's right on. If everybody knew that, our problems would be over within a year.
I believe that you should be trying to take that $5,000 and at least beat Gary Johnson again. I'm not much.
No, there are a lot of people that want me to run again, but it's a very difficult. It's
Well, I
very
think that
difficult.
people should throw some money at you, so at least somebody could, you know, this. You're not. That's why I wanted to come to you, Bill. You know, as we ramp up our platform and we start to market this platform, uh, I wanted to be the person that that carried the flag for what I've been saying all along. Okay, what is our status? Because we don't even know what our status is. You know, the term citizen means something in Black's law. The term corporation means something in Black's law. People don't even understand these terms and what they're doing. People understand when they get a mortgage and on that uh, deed of trust and the title, it says that they're a tenant. I mean, this gets into a whole different subject of natural and common law, as opposed to admiralty law and maritime law and what's going on, the International Uniform Commercial Code. All of these things we're mired, yeah, and immersed in layers of legal constructs that people have no clue of. So the first thing I wanted to get to was, okay, what's our status? Well, our status is this. Okay, what's the problem with money? Well, people are saying, you need this and you need this and you need this. And it got all these people with all of these opinions. And that's the state of the news business and the journalism that's going on today, is nobody is corroborating simple facts that can be understood by everybody. And that's why I wanted to come to you,
Well,
because
thank you.
everybody should know what money really is, which is the government should just simply be in charge, and we are the government.
That's right.
BillStill.com, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to learn about what money is. My name is Scott Pollock. I want to thank my guest, Mr. Still, and wish him well and his family well in this coming holiday season. This is the Critical Post Chicago Reports interview sessions. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.